Do. Man, I love that song. If you know where that comes from, that theme song from, see if you can comment down below. I'll give a shout out to whoever can do that. It's a throwback from the 80s, though. Okay, so today's going to be a cathartic session, and it's a long time coming, but I wanted to talk about why I left Bank of America back in 2021. It was a tough time. It was a tough decision, but it was something that I felt I needed to do, had to be done. It's something that when you take a look at what guides you, your guiding principles as a man, how you feel about authoritarianism, tyranny, it just had to be done. And like all things, maybe a little bit of a history lesson. It didn't all start like that. I had been with the bank for the better part of a decade. And when I started, it was really great. I was working prior to that for a monitoring firm. And I was doing some travel, and it was a lot of work, and it was a small startup. So I needed something more stable, something that had more regular hours, something that had great benefits. And I grabbed an opportunity at Bank of America. I came onto a team called Operational Intelligence. And I started off as a consultant. And I worked there. I worked my way up. So I went from a consultant to like a program analyst, and then I went from an analyst to application manager. And then after that, I went to a monitoring architect. And by the time I was done, I was the senior solutions architect for that group. And it was a great position. I really enjoyed it. A lot of wins, saved a lot of money, a lot of projects. I could talk for hours about monitoring and operations. It was my joy. And then I started noticing, and even with some of the leadership there, like Brian Moynihan, loved the guy. Like there was something about him, his character. He had like that je ne sais quoi, that executive presence. I remember one commercial when I started working there, and I drank the Kool-Aid. I even moved to Charlotte, North Carolina from Massachusetts to go work there. And I remember listening to him talk one of his commercials, and he's going into work, and he says, "I'm Brian Moynihan, and I work for Bank of America." And I always thought that was really great wording. I work for Bank of America. I'm not the CEO. I'm not the leader. I'm not the King Poobah. I work just like everybody else. You're another cog in the wheel. And it just felt very right. It felt very right. It was a great place to be. I liked my team. I liked what I did for work. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been there. I did take a small stint somewhere in the middle of it to go do my own startup, but I ended up coming back. I just really enjoyed it working there. And then something started to change late in my career. I'll never forget it. Like I walked into, well, we didn't walk into, but we were taking a conference call. There's quite a few people in there. And when we log on to the call, what we were greeted with was this image here, which is super foreign to me. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what is this? What are we looking at here? And we had some DEI representative who was talking to us about white privilege. And they asked us to look at this image and reflect. And so everybody's talking about how, oh, you know, victim and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just looking at this picture and I'm saying, I feel pride. Because we had to go back to a black and white photo to find some really messed up stuff. You know, like some stuff that just didn't feel right. And we'd come a long way from that. And when you look at the world as a whole in multiculturalism, the United States is the only one where we mix like this. And we are so far removed from this. And then I got to listen, not even listen. It was like chastised by the speaker. And she was a woman of color. And she's telling us that she came from another country and she had, you know, the victim mentality. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, you have a great title, you make great pay, you have a white nanny, because you told us 3 times, which I thought was interesting, like the white nanny. It was so crazy to listen to that. And then wanted us to debate her. So I started to talk to her, because here's my thought. And I knew something was wrong. It's just felt wrong. The whole thing felt wrong. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I didn't know how to elocute it well, but I just wanted to point out that this mindset is kind of dangerous. And I wish I knew more than what I knew now about the dangers of this type of thinking. There were a couple of people who pushed back, but it wasn't strong enough. And then it started just getting weird there. Very weird, very fast. And I'd said this on a previous podcast, but the mentality was this. Like, I'd get on another conference call and they'd bring up a hierarchy and you'd hear statements like, there's altogether too many white men on this team. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, wait, what? What are we talking about? How are we talking about this? Why is that even a thing we can say? Like, I came here to work. I didn't come here to talk about politics. I didn't come here to talk about privilege. I didn't come here for any of that. I came here to work. That's what I came here for. I work with cool technology. I work with a great team. We're pushing the envelope of the future. And why am I getting this, like, social lesson? This isn't what I signed up for. I don't know. I just, for me, and then once again, I just started digging my head in the sand. I'm like, if I just keep working hard and I treat this like a meritocracy, then everything's going to be all right. That's the way it should be, right? Like, I should not have to worry that I'm going to be judged based off of the color of my skin, some immutable characteristics like being Caucasian. And let me tell you, I don't have a college education. I didn't come from some great privileged background. I was a fishmonger's son, you know, middle class, you know, great school. You know, I did okay, you know, through high school. But I struggled and I worked for what I got. You know, when I wanted to learn something, I went from basically a fish truck driver all the way up to working on AI in some of the largest companies in the world. And that doesn't come out without a little bit of self-ambition and self-drive, but I had to prove myself every single step of the way. I wasn't given anything out of the gate. When I started in banking, I started off as a contact center rep and worked my way to the top there at Sovereign Bank / Banco Santander. So when I'm sitting there told that I have privilege, it's like, okay, I'd like to see where this comes from. And this, you know, in large groups, this stuff came out, but in private groups, there was a lot of people. We talk on the side. We all knew this was dogma that just was meant to make other people feel good. This wasn't, this hopefully wasn't something that was going to impact us. And so that was the what I would call, you know, issue number 1. Sitting there thinking to myself, this has got to go. Well, you know, fast forward, you know, a little bit more, and we started. Hold on, before I talk about that, I started thinking, like, where is this coming from to begin with? Like, where's this dictation come from? And I'll be honest, I'm pretty sure it came from this individual right here. So for those that don't know, this is Kathy Besant. She was the chief operations and technical officer at B of A for a number of years. I think she resigned, or she changed positions in 2021, pretty much right after I resigned. And when I would go to these quarterly meetings, she told a story one time. She said, she had been passed over for a promotion because Brian Moynihan had said something to the effect of that she needed to work on her executive presence. And whew, man, did that nail home. Like every single quarterly meeting, when you have to self-promote, when you do your own accolades, I was the first woman in this, and I was the greatest woman in this, and the most powerful woman in that, over and over again. I was surprised she didn't just say she was the first woman, full stop. Like the ego was just absolutely insane. And with the DEI initiatives, what I noticed is she had her token that was working with her. I'll leave him out of that because he seemed like a great guy. She'd ask him questions about how he had struggled, and he would pretty much be like, my life was pretty good. Like he wouldn't really engage in that. So I'm not going to name any names, but she touted him around to every call, and I noticed over the course of every quarterly call, like his title had changed. Like he just kept being moved from place to place. And then we had the pandemic. And then once we had the pandemic, the full shift swung from, talking about white privilege and DEI initiatives all the way to the vaccine. And this woman was a walking Pfizer commercial. Like during our quarterlies, I'm surprised the Chiron underneath didn't say, this quarterly brought to you by Pfizer. She was even called out a few times on it. There was one where they asked, well, why do you focus so much on the vaccine? Why are you talking about that? And she gave some canned response. Obviously, they don't ask questions that they don't have a canned response for. Don't get asked. Like these are all pre-done well before those quarterlies are even broadcasted. So, but they had to address it because there was enough people saying why. Ultimately, she was moved out to like a similar position and title, but with no direct reports, and then quietly resigned. My favorite thing, though, in all that, minus the tone deafness, was when she tried to take victim badges. Now, here's a wealthy white woman trying to claim victim status, some Asian Pacific heritage stuff, and I'm sitting there saying to myself, like, you got to be out of your mind. You make more money than anybody else on this call. You've probably got this phenomenal background, best education, and you're going to sit there and try to take victim status. It just absolutely blew my mind. But once again, just one person. So I'm like, how big of a problem can this be? And then when the pandemic hit, that's when I realized, and I could see the writing on the wall, right? We started to get the writing on the wall. She's talking about, we've got this new voluntary vaccine card submission, right? You can put your COVID vaccine picture of your vaccine card, voluntary. But let me tell you, nothing starts with voluntary, nothing. And now my job there, if I were to sum it up in a few sentences, was to look down the road 6 months and prevent whatever bad that was going to happen from happening. That I don't call myself the New Bedford Nostradamus for no reason. It's you just get good at it. You start seeing all these patterns, you're drawing at strings, and maybe it's a little bit of what was that movie there with Russell Crowe, Beautiful Mind? Like when they walk into the room and he's got all the things tied together with strings. And maybe some of it's like that, a little bit of tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff. But for the most part, you do start getting really good at that, and you start seeing things and prevent things from happening. And when you're in monitoring, that's the best place for you to be. But I could take that superpower and turn it on to what was going on with the vaccine, and I knew. I could feel it coming. Back in February of that year in 2021, Biden had asked the OSHA to stop collecting data on vaccine issues at work or COVID-related issues at work. And I couldn't understand it because this is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and you're asking them not to collect data around occupational safety and health. Why? Why would you do that? And I'll tell you why. Because you can do a lot of evil under the guise of ignorance. And if you don't know what you're doing and you're told what to do and you don't know it's bad, you can do a lot of evil. And that year, I started seeing the flags of they're going to do the mandates. I called the mandates well before, and I spoke to my supervisor probably 3 or 4 months in advance. And I told them, I said, hey, you guys start pushing this stuff, I'm out the door. I said, if you've got a spot that you need to get rid of a leader due to crunches, you can put my name out. I'll be the first one. I'll voluntarily resign. I'm out. But you can't. I'm going to tell you right now, you start this, I'm out the door. And he'd tell me, relax, relax. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. And then I started seeing that the messaging started to get a little bit more firmer, and we're just talking about it all the time. And I remember some of the calls that we had gotten on. They're talking about, what was it? Using different water fountains. And I'm in the calls and I'm like, well, we did that with the blacks and that didn't turn out all right. How did they feel about that? And then talking about taking different stairwells. And so I finally said, when am I going to get my Yellow Star David in the mail? Right? Because you're starting to talk to me like I'm a pariah. Because I'm not taking this thing. Whatever you got, I'm not taking it. And it's not because I had I'm like an anti-vaxxer. It's because this was brand new technology, mRNA. And I'd been following it since the 80s. I found when they started replacing some of the ATGC sequences for anti-inflammation, and then the lipid barrier transport was like the icing on the cake. It wasn't like it was an unknown to me, but this is not a vaccine in the sense that we traditionally had known it. This was genetic engineering. And I had spoken to my wife about it, and we had 3 young kids. And with all the fear porn that was being pumped out over the radio waves, we split the risk. And so she took it and I didn't. And that way, no matter what was happened, one of us would be around for the children. And then I remember the bank starting to say, you got to take this. And I'm like, how dare you override a decision that was between me, my wife, my doctor, and God? That's none of your business. Absolutely none of your business. And then this video came out.
If we raise our vaccination rate, protect ourselves and others with masking, expanded testing, and identify people who are infected, we can and we will turn the tide on COVID-19. It'll take a lot of hard work. It's going to take some time. Many of us are frustrated with the nearly 80 million Americans who are still not vaccinated, even though the vaccine is safe, effective, and free.
False.
While the vaccines provide strong protection for
False.
the vaccinated, we read about and hear about and we see the stories of hospitalized people,
False.
people on their deathbeds among the unvaccinated over the past few weeks.
False.
This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
False.
The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals.
False. My wife worked for the hospital, had a lot of friends in the hospital. Those hospitals were empty. Go look at the USS Mercy that was sitting in the New York Harbor doing absolute nothing during this.
Overrunning emergency rooms and intensive care units, leaving no room for someone with a heart attack or
False.
pancreatitis or cancer. This is not about freedom.
Yes, it is.
Personal choice.
Yes, it is.
It's about protecting yourself and those around you, the people you work with.
I loved that one. If you don't take this, you'll kill grandma. Ooh, ooh.
The people you care about, the people you love. My job as president is to protect all Americans. So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers.
Enforced by OSHA, by the way. That's what you can do when you don't know what's going on. That's what you can do under the guise of ignorance.
With 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated or show a negative test at least once a week. Some of the biggest companies are already requiring this. United Airlines, Disney, Tyson's Food, and even Fox News. My message to unvaccinated Americans is this. What more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see? We've made vaccinations free, safe, and convenient. The vaccine has FDA approval. Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot.
Yeah, if everybody jumped off the bridge, would you do it too?
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us.
Man, is my blood boil when I think about that. Man, is my blood boil. Never in my life as a president, my employee ever looked at me and shared those kinds of words with me. Ever in my life. Ever. And then at that point I knew, like it is at that point, as soon as the government took off the gloves there and said we're going to start doing mandates, you should immediately, Bank of America just towed the line, and they started to push that as well. And it's the funny thing is this, is they would hold you in the dark. They would hold you in the dark, and they'd say, if you want to know more information, they'd say, go to the CDC website. But let me tell you some stuff. Once again, New Bedford Nostradamus. I was sitting there and I got this unsolicited email from Workday. And Workday is like their HR tool. It's a popular HR for corporations. And it was a job for a, what do you call it? Like a banking center representative. And I looked through my email. I'd never in the 10 or close to 10 years that I'd been with that company ever gotten a single unprompted email from Workday for a job promotion. And I started thinking, who is doing this giant email blast to the entire corporation and not even checking to scrub it if it's existing employees already? It was just a blast email. And at that point I knew the only reason why you would do a blast email like that is because if you knew that you were going to have to build a giant queue of employees because you were going to let a bunch of them go. That's the only reason why. And my boss, God love him, he loved to prove me wrong. He loved it. Any opportunity he got to tell me I was wrong, he would take it. And I told him what was going to happen. I said, you guys are building a queue because you're going to need a lot of people because you're looking at mass layoffs here. And this was well before this September video from Biden. And I gave him that email, and he never brought it up again because he knew I was right. So what do you do in that situation when your company is actively discriminating you based on the color of your skin, trying to push some medical stuff down your throat and telling you have to take it? And I had supervisors on calls, and I am not kidding when I say they would say stuff like, you need to get the vaccine now. That's not hyperbole. Yeah, that's what was going on in that place. That was the kind of pressure that they were putting on people. So I resigned. I wrote in my resignation letter, medical tyranny, twice. And I usually read my writings and I try not to repeat myself, but there was no other term that I could find that was more appropriate than medical tyranny, because that's exactly what it was. And so I resigned. I said, this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this anymore. It was hard. Like, I moved my family to North Carolina, and then I immediately had to move them back. So if anybody's got 3 kids and has had to move across the country, you know logistically what kind of pain in the ass that is. And I did that, and then I moved them immediately back up north. And let me tell you, corporations would not touch me. I canceled myself. I'd had enough of it. There's no way that I'm going to sit here and give my greatness, the work that I do. I cared about my job. I worked hard. I'd work 80 hours a week. I loved working. And there was no way I was going to give that to them. No way. No way. Corporations wouldn't touch me for years. Let me tell you the stuff I had to do, man. I was cleaning parking lots. I was sorting cranberries in the middle of the night. You name it, man. I was doing some of the hardest grunt work in order to pay for my family. And it's interesting because I had my son, and this was tough. Ooh, it breaks my heart when I think about it. We're driving in the car, and I've got the kids, and they're teetering that age of believing in Santa and not believing in Santa. And my oldest is crossed that barrier. And we're driving by, and you know, I asked, I said, well, you know, I said, let's walk through things logically. I said, do you think that somebody has the capability of going and doing all of this work in one single night? Santa. And my oldest son, he's a good kid, and he said to me, he goes, well, what about the presents that are under the tree that I know you can't afford? Whew. Now, it was great for 2 reasons. One, well, it wasn't great, but it was interesting for 2 reasons. One was because You know, he's making the case for Santa for my youngest, which is admirable. But my children got a good taste of poverty. Like, they understood that. And that was something that I, growing up, I worked my ass off, dude. I worked my ass off so that I could support kids. And I had to cancel myself. And I'll tell you, it was tough. It was really tough. But yeah, I mean, that's, at the end of the day, when I look back on it now, I regret nothing. I sleep well. And I'll tell you, there are some instances when, you know, when I get a little heart palpitation or this, that, or the other thing, I thank God I don't have to think about whether I'm going to die from myocarditis or not. So, yeah, oof, that feels good to talk about that. Rough scenario, though. I'll tell you what, like, if, and the worst part is this, there's a lot of people at Bank of America, even today, that I know, because I was there for a long time. I was a known. People knew me there. There were a lot of people there that felt exactly the same way I did. And they didn't do anything about it. They let that company run right over them. And you know what? You guys are cowards. Cowards. And they're going to do it to you again. There's going to be some messed up stuff coming down the pipeline, and they're going to do it to you again. So think about that. You know, think about that and chew on that. And the last piece, and what's not lost on me, is we're about to go and celebrate Martin Luther King Day on Monday. We should cancel that holiday. You want to talk about something, you want to talk about colonizers and Thanksgiving Day and all this other stuff and how we need to cancel this. Why don't we cancel Martin Luther King Day? Because all of the themes that man preached, we don't listen to now. We no longer judge people by the content of their character. We look at their skin.